Domestic service was hard enough for Victorian women, but imagine working as a maid all your life, and then finding yourself jobless and on the streets. You will hear such an account today in an interview recorded with a poor woman who found herself in this desperate situation in 19th century London. In the 1840s, Henry Mayhew, a journalist, observed and documented the lives of everyday people in Victorian London, interviewing the working class and making a record of his conversations. He went into great detail about what life was like for the many, and not the few, in 19th century London, which, at that time, was perhaps the richest city in the world. He describes, with first-hand accounts, how hard life really was for the capital's poor, and, in this account, you will hear about the story of Mary, a domestic servant who fell on hard times on the streets of the metropolis. We can't be sure why she found herself out of domestic service, for it isn't stated. We are told that she was working until she was married, but the death of her husband would have left her without an income. Perhaps the situation she found herself in was a factor of her age or health. She was 55 years of age at the time of interview. It may also have been due to an issue with her working references that meant vacant situations were no longer open to her. But this is mere speculation. It is certainly true that washing floors, cooking and cleaning was a physically demanding job, even for a young woman, and poorly paid too, but it was a regular income nevertheless. Certainly in comparison to itinerant work, which was, without question, hard on the body, but with no guarantee of any income at all. Of course, for many, there was simply no choice but to take any work possible, and Mary took to sweeping street crossings. Sweeping streets was hard and dirty work, carried on by the working class and the poor. Most of the time, it barely offered a subsistence. What you earned relied on the generosity of middle and upper-class residents to tip the sweeper, and when they were out of town, or the weather was inclement, these impoverished souls would shiver at their street corners, with little prospect of eating before the next day. Find out how Mary struggled through life, battling sickness and bad weather to earn such little money that sometimes she could afford neither supper or even a humble drink of tea. Before we move on, if you're interested in history like this, and you want to find out what life was really like for people in the past, please consider subscribing for more content. If you want to support what we make for you, check out the description for links to ways you can help us to continue bringing the past alive. She is to be found any day between 8 in the morning and 7 in the evening, sweeping away in a convulsive, jerky sort of manner, close to a square I will not name, near the Foundling. The Foundling Hospital was an orphanage located in Bloomsbury, West London, founded in the mid-18th century. Its buildings were demolished in the early 20th century, and Coram Fields Playground and Gardens, opposite Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, now occupy its former location. She may be known by her pinched-up straw bonnet, with a broad, faded, almost colourless ribbon. She has weak eyes, and wears over them a brownish shade. Her face is tied up because of a gathering which she has on her head. She wears a small, old plaid cloak, a clean checked apron, and a tidy printed gown. She is rather shy at first, but willing and obliging enough withal, and she lives down a little yard, off one of the city's great streets. The yard is made like a mousetrap, small at the entrance, but amazingly large inside, and dilapidated, though extensive. Here are stables and a couple of blind alleys, nameless, or bearing the same name as the yard itself, and wherein are huddled more people than one could count in a quarter of an hour, and more children than one likes to remember. Dirty children, listlessly trailing an old tin baking dish or a worn-out shoe, tied to a piece of string. Sullen children, who turn away in a fit of sleepy anger if spoken to. Screaming children, setting all the parents in the yard at defiance. And quiet children, who are arranging banquets of dirt in the reeking gutters. The yard is devoted principally to costermongers. The crossing sweeper lives in the top room of a 2-storied house, in the very depth of the blind alley at the end of the yard. She has not even a room to herself, but pays 1 shilling a week for the privilege of sleeping with a woman who gets her living by selling tapes in the streets. "Ah," says the sweeper. "Poor woman. She has a hard time of it. Her husband is in the hospital with a bad leg. In fact, he's scarcely ever out. If you could hear that woman cough, you'd never forget it. She would have had to starve today if it hadn't been for a person who actually lent her a gown to pledge to raise her stock money. Poor thing, to exchange an item for credit at a pawnbroker." The room in which these people live has a sloping roof and a small paned window on each side. For furniture, there were 2 chairs and a shaky, 3-legged stool, a deal table and a bed rolled up against the wall. Nothing else. In one corner of the room lay the last lump remaining of the 7 pounds of coal. In another corner there were herbs in pans, and 2 water bottles without their noses. The most striking thing in that little room was some crockery the woman had managed to save from the wreck of her things. Among this, curiously enough, was a soup tureen, with its lid not even cracked. There was a piece of looking-glass, a small 3-cornered piece forming an almost equilateral triangle, and the oldest and most rubbed and worn-out piece of a mirror that ever escaped the dust-bin. The fireplace was a very small one, and on the table were 2 or 3 potatoes and about 1/5 of a red herring, which the poor street-seller had saved out of her breakfast to serve for her supper. "Take my solemn word for it, sir," said the sweeper, "and I wouldn't deceive you. That is all she will get besides a cup of weak tea when she comes home tired at night." The statement of this old sweeper is as follows. "My name is Mary. I live in the yard. I live with a woman in the back attic. She gets her living by selling flowers in pots in the street, but she is now doing badly. I pay her 1 shilling a week. My parents were Welsh. I was in service, or maid of all work, till I got married. My husband was a seafaring man when I married him. After we were married, he got his living by selling memorandum almanack books, and the like, about the streets." Almanacks were pocket books containing useful information on travel, culture, trade and fashion, and were a highly popular resource for sharing local knowledge before the digital age. He was driven to that because he had no trade in his hand, and he was obliged to do something for a living. He did not make much, and overexertion, with want of nourishment, brought on a paralytic stroke. He had the first fit about 2 years before he had the second. The third fit, which was the last, he had on the Monday, and died on the Wednesday week. I have 2 children still living. One of them is married to a poor man, who gets his living in the streets, but as far as lays in his power, he makes a good husband and father. My other daughter is living with a niece of mine, for I can't keep her, sir. She minds the children. My father was a journeyman shoemaker. He was killed, but I cannot remember how. I was too young. I can't recollect my mother. I was brought up by an uncle and aunt till I was able to go to service. I went out to service at 5, to mind children under a nurse, and I was in service till I got married. I had a great many situations, you see, sir. I was forced to keep in place because I had nowhere to go, my uncle and aunt not being able to keep me. I was never in noblemen's families, only tradespeople's. Service was very hard, sir, and so I believe it continues. I am 55 years of age, and I have been on the crossing 14 years, but just now it is very poor work indeed. Well, if I wishes for bad weather, I'm only like other people, I suppose. I have no regular customers at all. The only one I had left has lost his senses, sir. Mr. H. He used to allow us 6pence a week, but he went mad, and we don't get it now. By us, I mean the 3 crossing sweepers in the square where I work. Indeed, I like the winter time, for the families is in. Though the weather is more severe, yet you do get a few more halfpence. I take more from the staid elderly people than from the young. At Christmas, I think I took about 11 shillings, but certainly not more. The most I ever made at that season was 14 shillings. The worst about Christmas is that those who give much then generally hold their hand for a week or 2. 1 shilling a day would be as much as I want, sir. I have stood in the square all day for a halfpenny, and I have stood here for nothing. 1 week with another, I make 2 shillings in the 7 days, after paying for my broom. I have taken 3 halfpenny today. Yesterday. Let me see. Well, it was 3 halfpenny too. Monday, I don't remember. But Sunday, I recollect, it was 5 halfpenny. Years ago I made a great deal more, nearly 3 times as much. I come about 8 o'clock in the morning, and go away about 6 or 7. I am here every day. The boys used to come at one time with their brooms, but they're not allowed here now by the police. I should not think crossings worth purchasing, unless people make a better living on them than I do. I gave the poor creature a small piece of silver for her trouble, and asked her if that, with the 3 halfpenny, made a good day. She answered heartily, "Oh, I should like to see such another day tomorrow, sir. Winter is very much better than summer, only for the trial of standing in the frost and snow, but we certainly do get more then. The families won't be in town for 3 months to come yet. Ah, this neighbourhood is nothing to what it was. By God's removal, and by their own removal, the good families are all gone. The present families are not so liberal, nor so wealthy. It is not the richest people that give the most. Tradespeople, and specially gentlefolks who have situations, are better to me than the nobleman who rides in his carriage. I always go to Trinity Church, Gray's Inn Road, about 2 doors from the Welsh School. The Reverend Dr. Witherington preaches there. I always go on Sunday afternoon and evening, but I can't go in the morning. I can't get away from my crossing in time. I never omit a day in coming here, unless I'm ill, or the snow is too heavy, or the weather too bad, and then I'm obligated to resign. I have no friends, sir, only my children. My uncle and aunt have been dead a long time. I go to see my children on Sunday, or in the evening, when I leave here. After I leave, I have a cup of tea, and after that I go to bed. Very frequently I'm in bed at 9 o'clock. I have my cup of tea if I can anyway get it, but I'm forced to go without that sometimes. When my sight was better, I used to be very partial to reading, but I can't see the print, sir, now. I used to read the Bible, and the newspaper. Storybooks I have read, too, but not many novels. Yes, Robinson Crusoe, I know, but not the Pilgrim's Progress. I've heard of it. They tell me it is a very interesting book to read, but I never had it. We never had any ladies or scripture readers come to our lodgings. You see, we're so out, they might come a dozen times and not find us at home. I wear out 3 brooms in a week, but in the summer 1 will last a fortnight. I give 3 halfpenny for them. There are 2 halfpenny brooms, but they are not so good. They are liable to have their handles come out. It is very fatiguing standing so many hours. My legs ache with pain, and swell. I was once in Middlesex Hospital for 16 weeks with my legs. My eyes have been weak from a child. I have got a gathering in my head from catching cold standing on the crossing. I had the fever this time 12 months. I laid a fortnight and 4 days at home, and 7 weeks in the hospital. I took the diarrhea after that, and was 6 weeks under the doctor's hands. I used to do odd jobs, but my health won't permit me now. I used to make 2 or 3 shillings a week by 'em, and get scraps of things, but I get no broken victuals now. I never get anything from servants. They don't get more than they know what to do with. I don't get a drop of beer once in a month. I don't know, but this being out may be the best thing, after all, for if I was at home all my time, it would not agree with me.